All right, you should be good.
All right. Hello, I'm Mary Evans, and I work at the Center for Gifted Studies at Western Kentucky University. And tonight I'm going to be talking to you about the primary talent pool. This is the third in a series of sessions that we are doing for parents in the Jefferson County Public Schools. I'll give you a little bit about my background. I'm a parent and a grandparent, and I am a former teacher and a former elementary principal. And now I work at the Center for Gifted Studies. I'm going to start out by sharing some little stories with you about some high potential children that I have known. And as I share these stories, I want you to think about a child that you know, maybe a child that lives with you that may exhibit some of these same kinds of characteristics. Do you know this child? When other little girls were planning a Halloween costume to be a princess, Zoe designed her Halloween costumes to be quite unique. When she was age 4, she wanted to be Captain Hook. At age 5, she was Buck. She was Ben Franklin when she was 6, Harriet the Spy at 7, and most recently at age 9, she was Hermione Granger from Harry Potter. Not your typical little girl princess Halloween costumes, but this little girl was a reader, and so she knew about lots of different characters, real and fictional, and she wanted to portray them. And as you can see, her interests are beyond what a typical child that age would have an interest in. Do you know this child? At the beginning of first grade, Raul drew a self-portrait and showed it to his teacher. And he said, "This is a self-portrait without any skin on." Well, the teacher looked at it and it just looked kind of messy and she couldn't really tell what it was. And so she said, "Why don't you go back and work on that some more?" So he took it back to his table and worked on it. And when it brought it to her again, he had color-coded the nervous, skeletal, and muscular systems in red, blue, and black. You see, Raul knows lots of things about lots of different subjects, and one of his interests was the human body. And so he had done lots of reading and studying and looking at pictures of the human body. And these children we're talking about tonight may often show a very intense fascination with a particular field of interest. Do you know this child? The teacher showed her first graders that 2 plus 3 equals 3 plus 2, the community principle. Well, one student, an inquisitive one, and who was definitely thinking, asked, "Well, then, would 7 minus 2 equal 2 minus 7? And the teachers, being typical, working with first graders, replied, "Well, we really can't take a bigger number from a smaller number." But Amelia, age 6, raised her hand and said, "Actually, you can, and it's called a negative number." Now, if you asked Amelia, "How do you know about negative numbers?" she would say, "I just know." But how she knows about negative numbers is from her daddy. He's a computer programmer, and at night he and her mama take turns putting the girls to bed. And when the mom puts the girls to bed, they read stories. But when daddy puts the girls to bed, they do math. And he has introduced her to lots of different kinds of math than you would typically do in first grade. Her peers, most of them are probably not familiar with negative numbers, but she is. And one of the things about these kinds of children is they don't require a whole lot of drill to remember something. And so, this wasn't like she did worksheets about negative numbers. They just kind of talked about it and did some problems, and very little exposure, but it stuck with her. Do you know this child? The second graders were studying animals and drawing pictures of their favorite animals, and Cade drew a picture of penguins, and there was lots of green in the picture. And his teacher, thinking about penguins being in the snow, said, "Well, Cade, why isn't there any snow in your picture?" And he explained to his teacher that he had drawn Galapagos penguins that lived where it was warm. Well, his teacher had never heard of Galapagos penguins, and so she Googled it real quickly, and she learned that indeed Cade was correct, that there were Galapagos penguins that lived near the equator where it was warm, and so there wouldn't be snow in the picture. And when you ask Cade where he learned about Galapagos penguins, he said he learned about them from an ABC mouse video. Well, Zoe and Raoul and Amelia and Cade may all be candidates for the primary talent pool in Kentucky. The primary talent pool is for children in kindergarten through 3rd grade. In Kentucky, we have a regulation, 704, Kentucky Administrative Regulation 3.285, Programs for Gifted and Talented. And it requires that all school districts operate programs for exceptional children, K through 12. And in this regulation, gifted and talented students are included as a category of exceptional children. This regulation requires identification in 5 areas of giftedness in grades 4 through 12, and it requires a talent pool for primary students K through 3. The regulation delineates 5 areas of gifts and talents. And I have listed these here, and I will briefly explain what each one means. General intellectual ability. These are the students that across the board are gifted, maybe gifted in many areas. We think these are the kids who think at high levels, who reason and problem solve, who grasp information quickly in a variety of subjects, just overall high ability. The second area is specific academic aptitude. And here we're talking about students that may show particular strengths in 1 or 2 areas. We're talking about the student who may show exceptional mathematical ability, but if you talk to the reading teacher or the writing teacher, she would say, are you sure they have high ability? I don't see that. So it's not across the board like the general intellectual, but shows in 1 or more subject areas. Creativity. These are those independent thinkers, those kids who come up with very different, unique ideas. They can come up with lots of solutions to a problem. They like to do things their way, and they can be a little bit frustrating at school sometimes because they don't want to follow the way the teacher asked them to do it. The next area is leadership. And these are those children who on the playground, you will see them organizing a game and probably making up the rules to the game. And these are the kids that when the teacher has to step out of the room for something, or if there's a substitute teacher that day, this student can and will take over if given the opportunity. They like to make decisions, and once they make a decision, they'll stick with it and have all the reasons why that's the right decision. And then the 5th area is the visual and performing arts. And this includes music, dance, drama, the visual arts. These are the kids who may draw or doodle all over their paper, or always humming or beating on, rapping on their desk with their pencil or their fingers. These are the kids that like to be in plays and make up plays and those kinds of things. So there's 5 areas of gifted and talented that we recognize in Kentucky and try to find students that have high potential in all of these areas. So what exactly is the primary talent pool? And I always think about a presentation that I did years ago, and there was a little child sitting on the floor in front of her parent, and I'm talking about the primary talent pool and how students are nominated to be in it and how they're served once they're in it. And when I finished, this little child comes up to me and she says, I have just one question. And I said, what's your question? And she said, how much water is in that talent pool anyway? I just always think of that when I think of the primary talent pool. But what it actually is students who demonstrate that have demonstrated or potential ability to perform at exceptionally high levels, at levels that would be beyond what you would expect of a regular kindergartner or a first grader or a second grader or a third grader. And we try not to refer to these children as gifted. We refer to them as high potential learners. And then they become a part of this primary talent pool so that we can nurture their abilities and provide enrichment for them. And so hopefully this helps then by the time when they get to the end of third grade, when we start to do some formal identification for gifted education, that because we have nurtured their abilities, they will have a good chance of qualifying. What we know is that if children's abilities are not nurtured when they are young, that they may kind of go underground with their abilities and underachieve. And then by the time they get to third or fourth grade, it's not as evident. And of course, we don't want that to happen. The primary talent pool is particularly important for our disadvantaged children and our English learners and children who may not have had the wide background of experiences that some of our children have had. So very, very important to find these children young and intervene early and develop their talents so that they have a better chance of reaching the high potential that they are capable of. So let's talk a little bit more about some of the characteristics of high potential learners. And I want to preface this by saying that if you're thinking about your child or a child you know, don't expect them to have all of these characteristics. Most children would not have all of these characteristics, but a high potential learner would have several of these characteristics. And so as we kind of go through the list, think about which ones might fit that child that you know. One of the characteristics that stands out many times is these children have extensive vocabularies and use very complex sentence structure. We say it's like talking to a little adult when we talk to them. They understand and use more advanced vocabulary than most children their age would. I was reading an article about a child in a primary talent pool, and he came home from school one day and he said, "We had the most delicious cylinder-shaped snack." Well, how many primary age children would know what a cylinder is? And so his mom began to question him, well, tell me more about this snack. And turns out it was like a tortilla wrap kind of snack. But what an interesting way for him to describe it, a cylinder shaped snack. Many times these children are advanced readers, and because they have read books at higher levels, they've been exposed to more words, and they remember them and use them in their vocabularies. Unfortunately, sometimes this causes their peers not to understand them as well. Sometimes they talk beyond what the other first graders would be talking. Another characteristic we often see is many times they have good memories. And parents, you will relate to this. You will know that if you say, we're going to go to the park on Friday, you better do it because they're going to remember that you promised a trip to the park or the museum on Friday. We typically think that many children, if they're going to learn something, they need to hear it 5, 8, sometimes even 15 times. But these kids have such good memories that they hear something 1 or 2 times and they remember it. Another characteristic we sometimes see is they can use previously learned things in new context. If we think about Cade and the Galapagos penguins that Galapagos Island penguins, you know, he had seen that on ABC Mouse, but yet then he remembered that, and that came forward when he was talking about animals in class. I think of another example of a child had been questioning about, well, what does infinity mean? And it had been explained what that meant. And so when he had his 8th birthday and he was looking at the number of 8, he said, if we turned my age sideways, then I would be infinity. So just, how they pull concepts from other places that they've learned before into new situations. Most of them are fast learners. They catch on to things very quickly. Whatever subject it is their strengths are in, they learn more and more and at faster levels. They process information very quickly. They often are kind of witty and have an unusual sense of humor. Teachers enjoy them because sometimes the teacher will make some kind of a little joke and most of the kids don't get it, but these high potential kids do. I know a little boy who was talking about that his principal was a woman, and he said, I just don't know why we call her a principal. I think she should be called a princess-a-bull. So a little play on words there, and kind of funny, and the other kids were like, what's he talking about? Uneven development is something that we see that and can cause some frustration, particularly among the children. These are children who may be reading at a third grade level. I'll talk about a kindergartner that might be reading at a third grade level, doing 2-column addition, but can't tie shoes, may have difficulty holding a pencil, and they get so frustrated and they throw temper tantrums like a 2-year-old because of the frustration. And so that uneven development, there's a word for it, it's called asynchronous development, but it's that gap between their intellectual skills and their less developed, their advanced intellectual skills, but their less developed physical skills or their less developed emotional skills that are more age level, like their typical peers. But, if you can think at higher levels, but you can't carry out some of your ideas because your pencil won't do what you want it to do, or you can't create or build what you want to, it can lead to extreme frustration. And so that uneven development is a common characteristic. Another characteristic, many of these children are very curious about many things. You parents know they ask endless questions, and they really want deeper answers. They won't just take a surface level answer. They may ask things like, why is the sky blue, and want the scientific reason of why the sky is blue. They also will sometimes ask huge questions like, why do we have wars in our world? And really want to know and understand that, and be frustrated because we can't really answer that. Their questions are very thoughtful, and you can tell that they're processing things that maybe they've heard in the news or that they've heard adults talking about. They often solve problems in unique ways. They often use logic and reasoning that you wouldn't expect of a child so young. They may have a very vivid and original imagination, and it's so real to them. It's not uncommon for these children to have imaginary friends, imaginary playmates that are so real that it's so real to them that it's like it is a real person. They often are very observant, see things that other people don't even notice, and many times have a strong sense of justice. I know a little guy that would get so upset about things that happened at school that he did not think were fair. He wanted everyone to follow the rules just, to a T, and when they didn't, he just couldn't understand why other kids wouldn't follow the rules. And he became particularly upset one day in the lunchroom. I guess it was really noisy, and the lunchroom supervisor asked all the kids to put their heads down and be silent for a few minutes. And that evening at home, he was just indignant. He said, I wasn't being noisy. And he said it was incredibly degrading to have to put his head down for something that he didn't do. Where most kids would just put their heads down and go on and never give it another thought. But he internalized that, and it was really hard on him, and he was very upset about that. Now, these characteristics that I've been talking to you about, you think, Most children would have many of those characteristics, and you're absolutely right. Most children would have many of those characteristics. Most children are curious. Most children are observant. Most children do remember lots of things. But what we're looking at with high potential children is the frequency and the intensity to which you see these. They learn rapidly when they are very young. Many times that early learning development is a sign that these are high potential children, and distinguishes them from your more typical developing children. They always seem to remember things. They may know the names of all the different dinosaurs, or maybe they remember the statistics of baseball players when they're very young. And I wouldn't be able to remember those now, but they can remember those at a very young age. Like I said, all kids are curious, but these kids are intensely curious. Many of them have unusually long attention spans for subjects that they are interested in. They will just continue to work on a project if it's something of their interest that they're passionate about. They may spend hours and hours on it. And then it's like they seem to think or talk about nothing else. They're just fixated on that subject that they are so interested in. Verbal abilities, exceptional verbal abilities. I talked about that on the previous slide, and many times their verbal abilities come at a younger age than we would expect. I was thinking of a verbal ability example, and a child who said, "Did you notice that the word repetition has repetition in it?" Well, no, I had not thought about that, but this 6-year-old thought about that. Observant. All kids are observant, but these kids are deeply observant. They notice things that others might overlook, or might see things that we would consider kind of a non-essential piece of information. And then they give these long, drawn-out renditions of what they've noticed. And then sensitive, highly sensitive. They worry about the environment, or they may worry about animals, or the feelings and needs of others. And they take on like the problems of the world on their shoulders, like these world problems are theirs to solve. And as we think about these characteristics, there's many positives to them, but there can also be some problems related to some of these characteristics. For instance, the child that's the rapid learner, they may be very impatient, waiting for the group to catch up in the classroom. And if they're in a group situation, they may tend to take over, take charge, and do it their way, which can kind of be frustrating to the other children. That long attention span is good to a point, but they may resist being interrupted. And, in a school situation, when it's time for PE or music or to go to lunch, it's time to go. The child can't continue to just keep working on and on. High energy level, many of these children, very high energy level, don't need a whole lot of sleep. Sometimes these parents notice this even with babies, that they don't require as much sleep, or sleep as much as most babies do. Sometimes this high energy is even confused with ADHD, and so we have to be careful that we watch out for that. A diversity of interests is a great thing, but sometimes they go in so many different directions that parents need to help them narrow their focus a little bit. Being creative and inventive, sometimes they just kind of reject what's known and want to just do it totally their way. And that doesn't always work very well, particularly in a school situation. As we're thinking about the primary talent pool and how a child becomes a part of the primary talent pool, the first step is nomination. And typically it's the teachers who nominate children for the primary talent pool. And it's very important that teachers be trained in what to look for. But parents can also nominate their own children for the primary talent pool. Linda Silverman, a noted person in the field of gifted education, said that parents are 80% accurate in recognizing high potential in their own children. So that's a pretty good percentage there. Community members can also nominate children. When I was a principal, I remember having a Girl Scout leader one time nominate a child in the area of leadership. Sometimes coaches recognize leadership abilities and will nominate students. And then other students will sometimes say, hey, this other child needs to be in the primary talent pool. Kids know each other pretty well, and they recognize those things. So how are students selected for the primary talent pool? Well, there's several different ways. In grades K through 3, we do not do formal identification like an IQ test or a standardized achievement test. We use informal measures, and on the next slide, I'll give some examples of that. What we rely on is observation of what the child's doing, their writing samples, their work samples, and use professional judgment to look at those. In the primary, we do not use standardized or norm reference testing with all the numbers and scores because they're not shown to be as accurate with the very young children as they are with older children. So what are some informal measures? Well, behavior checklists are a common measure. And I'll show you a picture here of a behavior checklist. This is a jot down form that we developed at the Center for Gifted Studies. This one happens to be in visual art, and you can see the different boxes have characteristics of students who would show exceptional ability in the visual arts. And the way that this works is a teacher jots down the names of children that meet these certain characteristics. And they do this several times during a 6-8 week period, and then they put all of these jot down forms together, and the names that they are seeing repeated over and over again, then chances are that child shows abilities in this area. And there's checklists in lots of different areas. Anecdotal records is another way. The examples that I showed at the very beginning of this presentation about the Galapagos Island penguins or the first grader knowing about negative numbers, those are anecdotal records that teachers or parents might jot down. That would be a piece of evidence that this child should be a part of a primary talent pool. Parent questionnaires. And here are some sample questions that might be on a parent form. Describe your child's major interests, hobbies, art activities, music activities. Describe your child's reading habits and level of reading at home. And this is particularly important. Sometimes kids do not read at school at the level at which they are capable because they don't think they are supposed to. If I'm a first grader and I'm looking around at the books that everybody else around me is reading, I think, well, that's what I'm supposed to be reading, but yet at home I may be reading Harry Potter. So parents sometimes know more about what a child can be reading than the teacher does because the child doesn't show that at school. What games does your child enjoy playing? Do they like to play games of strategy and games that make them think? What is your child curious about? Describe ways your child sees situations differently than other children. What causes frustration for your child? Describe your child's behavior when working on a project of their choosing. So these are the sample kinds of questions that parents could answer that would be evidence and information that would help make a decision if the child would be a good candidate for the primary talent pool. Diagnostic data. This would be data that would come from MAP testing or some kind of teacher-made tests or even an exit slip that might be used in a classroom. And this is information that helps teachers determine what a child knows and what they're ready to learn. Work samples, what's happening in the class, the level of math problems that children are doing. Sometimes there's a calendar activity that teachers will do with kids, like today's November 16th. What are all the math problems you can come up with that the answer is 16? You know, some kids may say 8 plus 8. Somebody else might have a problem that involved subtraction and addition and you know, more complicated. So that would be an example of a work sample. And it's, if you have formal test data, it's okay to look at that, but you can't allow that to disqualify a child from being in the talent pool. But if there's a formal test data that's given to all of the children, then that can be used. Products that the kids do, you know, like a detailed drawing might be something that would be used to as evidence that a child should be looked at in the area of art, or a story that's greatly elaborated, or performances. If you're doing readers theater in your classroom and you know, a child puts a lot of expression in and you know, maybe adds to the story, and that could be some important information. So those are examples of informal measures. Then, if the school gives formal measures, they can be used to determine the level of student achievement, the level of appropriate instruction. Something we want to look at is to make sure that these are not limited by a grade level ceiling, because, you know, if a child's in second grade and the only problems on that test are second grade problems, then you're not going to really know what that child can do. And like I said before, formal measures cannot be used to deny services or placement, but they can be used to provide more information. Here's an example of a question that is on an achievement test, and it's a, you know, a multiple choice question, and I have a transcript. The little boy was interviewed about the answer he chose. But as you think about this question, which would you use for storage? And think about, you know, what first comes to your mind, what answer you would give. And I'll share with you what this little boy Josh said. This was a second grade multiple choice question on an ability test. And he's decides to talk about the question, and he said, well, of course, you could use a box for storage. So I could have chosen that answer. But an airplane has a lot more storage space than a box. And if you're traveling with your luggage, you wouldn't store it in a box. A box can be stored in an airplane, but an airplane cannot be stored in a box. So I chose airplane. Now, do you think that was the right answer that the test publishers chose? No, the right answer was a box. But this shows how sometimes high ability kids think in different ways, and his reasoning is all very strong, all very logical, all very valid, but yet he would have missed that question. Once the evidence is gathered, and for the primary talent pool, you have to have at least 3 pieces of informal evidence, then that is put together in a portfolio, and it goes to a committee that then determines whether this child should be selected for the primary talent pool and what services should be provided. And the makeup of that committee, of course, varies from school to school and from time to time, but in general, you would have an administrator on that committee who might chair the committee. You would have a GT resource teacher, you know, someone trained and gifted and talented, and they might be the chair instead of the principal. You would have primary classroom teachers that know and work with these children. You would have special area teachers if you have children that are being nominated in art, music. Then hopefully the school has an art teacher, a music teacher. In the area of dance, most schools don't have dance teachers or drama teachers, but in the area of dance, sometimes the PE teacher works in that area. So you'd have special area teachers. Parents and community members may be on the committee. That doesn't usually occur, but the regulation says that it certainly could occur. The important thing, one of the important things to remember about the primary talent pool is that we need to cast a wide net. The primary talent pool is designed to serve the top 25% of primary students. And where do we get that 25%? Well, it's roughly 5% from each area. 5% general intellectual, creativity, leadership, etc. And the reason for this high number is so that we nurture a larger number of these high potential learners through the primary years. And this is particularly crucial for disadvantaged children who may not have had the opportunities and the experiences that would make them do well on those standardized tests when they get to the end of the third grade. So 25%, that sounds like a high number, but that is to cast that wide net and to be inclusive and include as many children with high potential as possible. Then, once they are selected, how are they served? Well, it's very important that services are matched to their needs, interests, and abilities. Remember that with high potential students, that their needs are their strengths. We're used to thinking of needs as being deficits, things that students struggle with. But in this case, the needs are their strengths, and so they need to have services that will address those needs. And there needs to be multiple service delivery options at each grade level, not just one service, because not one size fits all. Kids, there's going to be a wide variation in the talents that these children have, and so it's going to take a range of services to meet their needs. Now, when we look at options, there's lots of different options, and these are just some of them, but I tried to select the ones that I most commonly see in the primary talent pool. And probably the one I see most often is differentiation. And differentiation means that we're trying to get that fit between what a child knows and is ready to learn and what opportunities are provided for them. And the best way to find this out is to pre-assess. If we're starting a new math unit or starting a new science unit, we need to pre-assess and ask some questions that you might typically ask at the end of that lesson or that unit to see who already knows it. And many times teachers are surprised. Kids will know things they're not expecting them to know. Curriculum compacting. Once you do some pre-assessment, you may find that a child already knows half of what you were going to teach in that unit. So you can figure out what they don't know, teach them that part, and then that buys some time for them to work on some things that they're interested in, like independent study kinds of things. Enrichment services. This is providing opportunities for kids to learn things beyond what is happening in the classroom. It's kind of like a horizontal approach. You know, if the class is studying community helpers in kindergarten, you know, some child might be particularly interested in fire people or police officers and want to dig more deeply into what they do and how you would become one and what their job might involve. Other ways that enrichment's provided is many times teachers will use something called a choice board, where there'll be maybe 6 options of activities, and kids can choose what they're interested in, or learning centers with different task cards that are at different levels for kids to work on. Cluster grouping is another great service option, and this is where you group kids together that are ready to learn at a certain level. You know, rather than putting you know, 2 high potential kids in this first grade and this first grade and this first grade, you'd put all 6 of them in one first grade, and that teacher would be given some special training, and then she would know how to differentiate to meet the needs of that group of 6. And the advantage of that is, if I'm a classroom teacher and I only have 2 kids working at an advanced math level or an advanced reading level, it's going to be harder for me to find the time to plan and devote the time to a group of 2, but if I have a group of 6, a fourth of my class, then I'm going to be more likely to spend some time planning for that. Various acceleration options. There's you know, 20 different types of acceleration. For primary children, what we typically see is subject area acceleration, where you might have a first grader that would go to second grade for reading or math, or you might have whole grade level acceleration. When I was a principal, we had a kindergartner that we accelerated. She started out kindergarten, was in kindergarten the first quarter, and then the next 3 quarters she was in first grade. So whole grade acceleration is something else that can occur. Another service is resource rooms or pull-out classes, where a specialist teacher, a teacher trained in how to work with high potential kids, might be in the building 1 or 2 days a week, and children will be pulled out of the regular classroom for an hour to work with other kids and this teacher at a more advanced level. Independent study is something else. So we're talking about the curriculum compacting. If they already know some of the science that's being taught, then while the other kids are learning those concepts, they might do an independent study in the area of science, and maybe make a model of a plant of the future or something while the other kids are studying the parts of plants. And then mentorships. We don't see those as often in the primary, but I did one time have a 3rd grade little boy who was extremely interested in robotics. And it just so happened our school secretary's son was on the robotics team at high school. And the high school got out an hour before the elementary school did. And so he would come over and he would just sit in his mom's office. But 1 day a week, then he would mentor this little boy that was interested in robotics. So that's another great service. All students have the right to learn, and as a parent, this is something you're going to kind of want to monitor, because to learn means to make at least 1 year's progress from the entry part of the school year. And so if we typically think of a 1st grader that would start 1st grade reading on the 1st grade level, and by the end of 1st grade, we'd want them to be ready to read on the 2nd grade level. But if your child comes into 1st grade and they're already reading on the 3rd grade level, then by the end of the year, you want them to be able to read at least on the 4th grade level. But what happens sometimes is the kids who make the least amount of progress are the high ability kids, because they don't have the opportunity. They're not presented with the higher level reading materials so that they can make that 1 year's progress. And so that's something as teachers and parents we really need to work on to make sure happens. The other thing we need to think about is that the first 4 to 6 weeks of school are sometimes really painful for high ability students, because so much of that's review, and they don't really need that review. And so they just sit there and just kind of bide their time for the kids, waiting for the kids who do need that review. And unfortunately, students who are most likely to learn the least during the school year are the most capable learners, and that we just can't let that continue to happen. Do primary talent pool students have a gifted student service plan, which is called a GSSP? 4th, 5th, and higher, that is a part of the regulation, but it is not required for a child in the primary talent pool. The GSSP is kind of like an individualized education plan that we think about in special education, but that's not required for the primary talent pool. But best practice would say that there would be a good record kept of the services that are being provided. Can a student be selected for the primary talent pool 1 year and then not the next? Once a student is in the primary talent pool, that student remains in the talent pool until exiting the 3rd grade. So, in the higher grades, we kind of say once gifted, always gifted. Once in the primary talent pool, they remain in the talent pool. Now, it doesn't mean the services stay the same. The services need to be constantly monitored and adjusted to fit the child's specific needs. Here's a big question. Do primary talent pool students automatically qualify as gifted students once they move into 4th grade? No. Primary talent pool students must be formally identified in one or more areas of giftedness at the 4th grade level. The purpose of the primary talent pool is to nurture talents, develop talents, and many of those children then do qualify when it's time for the formal identification, like the standardized IQ testing and the standardized achievement testing that occurs at the end of 3rd grade or going into 4th grade. But just because a child is in the primary talent pool does not automatically qualify them. And it is difficult. Sometimes a child will exit the primary talent pool and not qualify, but then sometimes they'll qualify later as a 5th grader or a 6th grader. Okay, now we're going to talk about how can parents support the development of their child's abilities. And I'm going to talk about those in three different areas: at home, in the community, and at school. So at home, one of the most important things as parents that we can do is to create an environment that encourages self-expression. Provide the materials, provide the resources, the space, the time, have the markers, have the paints, have the cardboard, the boxes, keep a recycle bin that has all of these things kids can build with. Um, you know, I know it can be messy, it can take a lot of space, but that's so important for children, that they have a place to create and to build and to design, and that it's not just thrown away. Now I know you can't keep everything, but keep it for a while, as long as the child is interested in it. I know a little girl right now that is designing a kitchen, and she did a little FaceTime with me, and she has developed she's made a refrigerator out of a box, and for the shelf, for the freezer department, she has rigged up string and suspended it from the top. So lots of creativity going on there. The mama's probably not going to want to have that in her living room forever, but it'll be there for a while. Explore areas of interest, and be prepared for areas of interest to change after a while too. Kids will be, intensely interested in something for a while, and then they'll kind of satiate that interest and move on to something else. But be ready to explore with them what their area of interest in. But maybe you want to rent the musical instrument rather than buy an expensive instrument right off the bat, because you don't know if they're really going to want to play the saxophone very long. Maybe you don't want to buy the most expensive telescope right off the bat, but you do want to take them to the planetarium and let them learn as much about the stars and space, and watch the SpaceX liftoff with them, and enjoy exploring those interests together. One of the most important things we can do for our children is to emphasize effort and progress rather than perfection. They're going to have these ideas in their mind of what they want something to be built like, or look like, or be like, and they can't quite accomplish that. But what we want to talk about is, wow, you worked so hard on that, and let's see, what did we learn by doing this? And not so much focus on the final project. We talked about how their manual dexterity may not be able to keep up with their ideas in their head. And we want to model for them how mistakes can be opportunities to discover and learn. As parents, we need to share with our kids about our projects that don't always work out. I think about painting the bedroom and picking out what I thought was just the perfect color of paint, but when it was on the wall, it didn't look like I thought it was going to look. Well, we can fix that. We can repaint that, but we need to talk about that and make sure our kids realize that we make mistakes, but how do we handle those? We can find positive ways to overcome them. Talk about a project at work that didn't work out, but how did we learn about what did we learn from that, and how can we do it differently? We don't always succeed, and sometimes kids get that notion that they're a failure if it doesn't work out perfectly the first time. But as parents, we can model that for them. In the community, we want to be looking for programs and activities in the community that match with our children's interests, or that introduce them to other interests that they may not be aware of. I know in Louisville there are many, many great opportunities. We're very fortunate here in Bowling Green. We have the Kentucky Museum with wonderful programs and reenactments and activities for children. Our center, the Center for Gifted Studies, provides Super Saturdays programs for children, and those are online right now, so your kids in Louisville could participate in that. We have Lost River Cave here, which has a wonderful naturalist program that kids enjoy. We have an international festival. We have a wonderful public library that has lots of engineering and STEM kinds of activities. So look for programs in the community and take advantage of those. And many of them are very inexpensive or no cost at all. Find a mentor in an area of interest. If your child is interested in animals, maybe they could spend some time working with a veterinarian, or find a college student or a high school student that shares their interest. And then volunteer as a family to make the world a better place. Walk dogs at the Humane Society, or donate items to a homeless shelter, or work together as a family at a soup kitchen, or something so that children see how they can help make the world a better place, because we were talking about that sensitivity they have and that concern for real world issues. And so it's good for them to see how they can address these things and make a difference. And then at school, it's very important as parents that you be advocates for your children at school. And, there's ways to advocate that work, and there's ways that don't. So we want to do it the right way. You know your children better than anybody else does. And so you need to be the person to advocate for them. And to, if you think that they have exceptional abilities, you're probably right. And you may think that, but the school hasn't noticed it, or the teacher hasn't noticed it, and we kind of try to second guess ourselves. But the more information you gain, learning about these characteristics, you will know as a parent. So trust your judgment and speak up. Now, I do know that deciding to talk to your child's teacher may be kind of a daunting challenge. You don't want to be seen as the pushy parent, or it'll sound like I'm bragging, or many parents think that, if I ask to talk to the teacher and express a concern, that it might have a negative effect on my child. So they keep quiet and don't speak up. I have a little anecdote about the reality of teaching in today's class. If a doctor, a lawyer, a dentist had 40 people in his or her office at one time, all of whom had different needs, and some of whom didn't want to be there and were causing trouble, and the doctor, lawyer, or dentist, without assistance, had to treat them all with professional excellence for 9 months, then he or she might have some conception of what the classroom teacher's job is. So it's a very big, tough job. So if your classroom teacher has not called you saying they recognize exceptional abilities, it may be that they are a little bit preoccupied with some other things. So it's always good to walk in the teacher's shoes a little bit. Many of them may not be adequately prepared for everything they have to deal with in today's classrooms. In many of the schools in Louisville and other places, there's high percentages of children from poverty. There's many children that don't yet speak English very well. There's many children with special needs, disabilities, autism, those kinds of things. There's instability in homes. There's violence at home and in school. Teachers have to be ready for anything. And in one classroom, there is an extremely wide span of achievement levels. We've heard maybe up to 8 levels. So like if you're a second grade teacher, you might have kids that don't know their letters, don't know their alphabet, but you might have kids that are reading at 6th grade level or higher. And so a teacher has that wide range of achievement levels to address. And from being a principal in a school, I know that there is so much pressure to get test scores up. And the emphasis really seems to be on, getting the children that are below grade level up to grade level, and not so much emphasis on the kids that are already at grade level and beyond, taking them beyond. That's not where the emphasis is. And also, teachers are not required to take coursework in gifted education. So some of them, depending on where they went, will have a little bit of background, but many of them don't. And because of that, they may believe some of the myths about gifted education and have some false assumptions and think that, gifted kids will be fine on their own. We don't need to do anything different for them. So there's lots that the teacher's dealing with. So how do you help out in this area? How do you advocate for your child appropriately and effectively? Well, first thing is we recognize that educating gifted students is a team effort. It's the parents and the school working together in a cooperative way. And it's very important to communicate with the teachers. And if you decide to have a meeting with the teacher, you want to be prepared. You want to have done your research. You want to have learned about gifted education as much as you can. And to know specifically, what your concerns are and what you'd like to see happen. And one of the first places to begin with is your child. And many times our children will say to us, I'm bored. Well, that's not real helpful. You need to go a little bit deeper than that. And we want to start even in the primary grades of teaching kids to be an advocate for themselves, to be a voice for their own needs. So talk to them and try to get them to be specific. You can ask them something like, okay, I understand you're feeling bored at school. Well, what would make school more interesting for you? And many times they'll say things like, well, I really like it when my teacher gives us a choice of what we study. Or, I really like it when I'm able to do harder work. And so that's more helpful than I'm bored. And so then you can have some more specific information to share with the teacher. When you go in to meet with the teacher, you want to be very supportive of the school. Sometimes we feel kind of angry and we want to kind of vent our frustration, but that's not going to be very helpful for anybody. So you want to, express your support and your appreciation for what's being accomplished, and, be very careful with what you say and how you say it. Like I said, you don't want to go in and say, oh, my child's so bored in your class. That puts the teacher on the defensive right away. You also want to be careful not to ask for more work. If you say, well, my child, just gets their work done so fast and they need more work. Well, if the teacher doesn't have a good understanding, they may give you exactly what you asked for and may get more busy work for your child. And that's not what you want. You want to acknowledge the positive things that are happening. For instance, if your child has said to you, I really like it when my teacher gives me a choice, well, then you can say, Cade really enjoyed when he got to pick his own animal that he could do his project about, so that you're giving positive reinforcement of the things that are going well. And you've familiarized yourself with the research, so you can talk about specific things that might happen, and say, have you ever thought about setting up some learning centers that had different task cards, and you could even volunteer and say, I'll help gather some material for these. And then, of course, you want to listen to what the teacher says, because what they see at school may be very different from what you're hearing at home. Kids sometimes, are very quiet at school, and the teacher has no idea what they're feeling, because, they don't want to complain at school, but they'll do plenty of complaining when they get home. And then as you work with the teacher, you want to try to come up with things that you all can come to consensus on. Maybe the teacher would agree to do some pre-testing that might really show that your child already knows quite a bit before they start. Maybe she hadn't really thought about doing pre-testing, or whatever you come up with consensus that she does feel that she might be able to work with, or he work with. Then you want to set a timeline for follow-up. Say, well, could I check back with you in a couple of weeks on that? And then, of course, be able to be very grateful to the teacher for their time. And then, of course, you do want to follow up, because this is important. And, sometimes there's meetings and then teachers get back into the busyness of the classroom and forget. And so you want to follow up and make sure that what you've talked about is happening. And then, we're talking about kids being advocates for themselves. The strongest voice is their own. And, kids can be very passionate. And if they can be taught how to speak up for themselves, that is very powerful. And one of the ways to do that is to role play. You be the teacher and you role play a conversation that your child could have with their teacher where they're asking for maybe some opportunities to develop a project, an independent study project or something, and help the child clarify issues. And so if the issue is that you get your work done quickly and then you don't know what to do, well, then what would be some things you would like to do that you could present to the teacher and say, well, when I get my work done, would it be okay if I worked on a project over here? So have some solutions to the problem. And then of course it's so important to coach our children into how to use respectful language and, to ask in the right way and at the right time to talk to the teacher and that kind of thing, because sometimes they get frustrated and they can be kind of disrespectful, and that's not going to accomplish anything. One of the things that's very helpful for parents is to connect with other parents, because there are many other parents who have children similar, and they have done research and gathered valuable information, and so they can share, and they can understand your feelings. Some parents think that, oh, you've got smart kids, that's a piece of cake, you don't have anything to complain about. But, find other parents that are experiencing the same kinds of things you are, and they will know about, resources in the community and, special opportunities that are coming up that your children might benefit from. And the moral support, just knowing that other parents are going through some of the things that you are, some of the same struggles you are. And then there are local and state parent groups, and the Kentucky Association for Gifted Education is a great group to be a part of. And I have a slide coming up to talk more about that. One of the great advocacy groups is the National Association for Gifted Children, and they just finished their national conference, and they are an organization to support the growth and development of gifted and talented children. And they do this through education, advocacy, community building, and research. And they have all kinds of resources. They have a wonderful website that's listed here, and with sections just for parents. And one of the things that I have really enjoyed as a parent and a grandparent is their Parenting for High Potential newsletter that they put out. And they do some research on toys and games for gifted kids. So I thought you might like to know about this since the holidays are coming up. And they have kind of a test group of children and teenagers who test out these toys and games. And here's a couple that my family, my grandchildren, have enjoyed that are particularly fun. The first one here is Bunny Boo, and it's really good for concentration and problem solving and spatial insight and planning and logic. And there's these cards that show the bunny in all these different positions. And the child looks at the cards, and then they have to arrange the bunny. And sometimes I think, oh, I've got this. And then I realize, oh, too much of the bunny's ears are showing. I haven't done this just right. And there's different levels on the cards. It goes from a really simple level to a more complex level. Another one that we got last year is called Three Little Piggies. And of course, this goes with the story of the three little pigs. And there's 4 different levels of this one. There's a starter level, a junior level, an expert level, and a master level. And there's the three little pigs, and there's a wolf, and the 3 houses. And the lowest level, you try to fit all these puzzle pieces together so that the pigs stay outside of the houses. But then it gets more challenging, and you add the wolf, and you try to cover the pigs with the houses so that the wolf can't get them. And so there's the placement of the pigs and the wolf is delineated on the cards, and the cards gradually get harder and harder. And this one game, Three Little Piggies, is for children ages 3 to 10. And there's 48 different challenges. So they can play that for a long time. But this list on the National Association for Gifted Children website, there are lots and lots of games for all ages that really are challenging and fun for children. Another great thing that the National Association for Gifted Children provides for parents are parent tip sheets. And these, there's a bunch of them. I just have listed some of the topics here. You know, perfectionism, enrichment, acceleration, advocacy, wide variety of them. And they're very concise. They're just the front and back of a sheet, so they're not something lengthy to read, and very helpful for parents. Then the Kentucky Association for Gifted Education, known as CAGE, it is a volunteer group of parents and teachers and administrators that are interested in appropriate educational opportunities for gifted and talented youth in Kentucky. And they have a wonderful website with lots of resources. And one of the things that I wanted to point out is this section that's on the website called Gifted Enrichment Online Resources. And this has been put together really since March. And there are just a wide variety of information on there. And one of the ones that I think is particularly great is these virtual tours. And there's over 30 different virtual tours that are available. There's the Frazier Museum in Louisville is one of the tours, as well as the Palace of Versailles. And then here's some listed on this slide. I did the Mars one with my granddaughters, and it's developed by NASA, and it has the Curiosity rover and a 360 camera, and it's like you're on the surface of Mars and you're moving around and seeing all the different things. So these virtual tours are great. So there's really just so many different resources on the CAGE website for parents that you will find interesting and helpful. And then, of course, the Center for Gifted Studies at WKU, where I work, has programming for gifted students, their parents, and their educators. It also works very hard at advocacy, and we would really like for you all to join us in advocacy efforts. The funding for gifted education is so small, and believe it or not, it has not changed from what it was basically in 1990. And that's very unfortunate. You know, everything else costs more than it did in 1990, yet our funding has remained the same. So in order to really more fully meet the needs of high potential children and gifted children in our state, we need more funding. And if parents could become a part of the Kentucky Association for Gifted Education and help us with advocacy efforts, that would be wonderful. Our center also does research, and we had a big research project with the Jefferson County Schools. It was called Project RAP, that finished just a couple of years ago. RAP stands for Reaching Academic Potential. And we worked with 5 Jefferson County schools and piloted things like cluster grouping, and we did lots of professional development training with teachers, and so it was a great project. Our center offers all kinds of programming for children, for young children, primary age children. We have Super Saturdays, and we have those in the fall and in the winter. And our next series of Super Saturdays, and these are for children in grades 1 through 6. These will be in February coming up. And they are for a couple of hours on a Saturday morning, and they are virtually right now, so your children in Louisville could participate easily. But we also have had many parents from Louisville drive to Bowling Green when we were having face-to-face classes because they wanted their children to have those kinds of opportunities. In the summer, we have Camp Explore, which is for children finishing grades 1 through 3. and Camp Innovate for children finishing grades 3 through 5. And these are day camps, and they rotate through math and science and language arts and acting and clowning, and have an opportunity to interact with other high potential children and learn lots of new things. And then as your children get older, we have SCATS, the summer camp for academically talented middle school students, which is a 2-week, it can be residential or non-residential. And then VAMPY, verbally and mathematically precocious youth, and it's for children finishing 7th through 10th. Super Saturdays, just to give you the dates that are coming up in February, February 6th, 13, and 20. And so mark those on your calendar. You might want your children to participate in those. This fall, we just finished a series of classes where they did spooky art and spookier science, coding, make your own escape rooms, creepy crawlers, engineering. So a wide variety of classes that children can participate in. And then another opportunity through the Center for Gifted Studies is Little Learners, Big Ideas, and I've put the website there. We know that we want our children to become innovators. I was just reading about the top 10 skills that the World Economic Forum Future Jobs Report is looking for, and complex problem solving, critical thinking, and creativity are the top 3. And of course, that starts preparing children for that before they step foot in the school. And so this program, Little Learners, Big Ideas, has developed resources to help parents with this. And there's a 6-part video series on topics such as literacy, wonder, curiosity, learning on the go, like when you take your children to visit museums and things, the kinds of questions that, that you want to ask, growing young minds, environment for thinking and learning. So great resources there also. I will conclude now with some wise words from Dr. Linda Silverman, who has worked with gifted students and their parents for many years. And here's what she has to say. Gifted children are expensive and time-consuming. They usually need less sleep than their parents do, ask more questions than you can answer, want 100% of your attention 24 hours a day, are obsessive about their hobbies, may be unstimulated by the regular classroom curriculum, react intensely to everything, endlessly long for a best friend who understands them, hold perfectionistic standards for themselves and you, and may keep their bedrooms in a condition that you can never show company. They may want to know the meaning of life when other children only want to know how to tie their shoes. In order to be the perfect parent, you need unlimited funds, unlimited patience, an encyclopedic mind, and someone to sleep for you. If you find yourself exhausted, remember that someday your daughter, the doctor, or your son, the artist, will have you to thank. No matter what schools you put them in, it is their home life that largely determines what they do with their lives. Trust your intuitive judgment about their needs. No one knows them better than you do. So thank you so much for watching this video. And we at the Center for Gifted Studies are ready to respond to questions and provide resources. So just reach out to us. So thank you so much.